before a burglar touches your door, they've already decided your house is worth it. Here's what I mean by that, and here's what I've learned in 22 years of prepping that changes how you look at every property you've ever lived in. I've been doing this since 2002. Started after a break-in at a house I rented in my late 20s, came home to a kicked door and a missing laptop. That was the moment I stopped treating security like a product you buy and started treating it like a system you build. Since then, I've stress-tested physical security setups through 3 home builds, 2 apartment situations, a rural property with no neighbors for half a mile, and a suburban house on a corner lot with 4 approach vectors. I've run audit walks at 2 a.m. I've had neighbors report suspicious vehicles and worked through those scenarios in real time. I've tested gear, tested lighting configurations, tested door hardware under actual load. What I'm about to walk you through isn't theory. It's what held up and what didn't. Most people build a response system and think they've built a security system. Locks, cameras, alarm contracts, those are all tools that activate after a threat has already committed to your property. That's not protection. That's damage control with a sticker on it. The real work happens before anyone reaches your door, and it starts with understanding how residential targeting actually works. Tactic 1. Understand the pre-screening process. Criminals who target residential homes are not picking randomly. Most break-ins involve at least 1 pre-approach pass. The person walks the street, drives the block, or sits in a parked car and reads the environment before making any move. They're looking for signals-specific, observable signals that tell them whether your home is worth the risk or whether the 1-2 doors down is a better option. I first mapped this out after talking to a retired law enforcement analyst who spent 15 years studying residential burglary patterns. What he described matched everything I'd already learned by walking my own properties at night with a notebook. Once you know what the pre-screening pass looks for, you stop asking, how do I survive a break-in, and start asking, how do I fail the pre-screen? Those are completely different questions with completely different answers. Tactic 2. Do the audit walk before anything else. You've never stood at the curb and asked what your home looks like to someone with bad intentions. Do it tonight after dark. Walk every approach path to your property. Stand at the street. Stand at the driveway entrance. Walk the side corridor alongside the garage. Ask 1 question from each position. What's concealed? What's lit? What signals someone is home? What signals no one's been home since Tuesday? This takes 40 minutes. I've done it at every place I've lived, and every single time I've found something I didn't expect. A shadow corridor I'd stopped seeing because I used that path every day. A hedge that created a working space against the foundation wall I'd planted myself for privacy. A porch light that flooded my front door and left every approach path completely dark. The audit walk is the foundation. Everything else builds on what you find. Tactic 3. Fix your lighting from the outside in. The most common residential lighting mistake is placing fixtures to illuminate the entry point while leaving the perimeter in shadow. A bright porch light that floods your front door feels reassuring. What it actually does is silhouette you when you answer and leave the approach corridors, the path from the street, the gap alongside the garage, the space beside the steps in exactly the shadow that provides cover. I've run this configuration change on 4 properties. Motion-activated lights placed at the property boundary, angled outward rather than inward, do 2 things at once. They eliminate shadow cover at the point where the approach decision gets made, and they signal active monitoring. A light that fires when someone enters the property corridor tells them they've already been detected before they've committed to anything. That changes the calculation at the decision point, not after it. 1 specific note: aim for boundary coverage, not door coverage. The door is too late. The street-to-property transition is where the deterrence has to land. Tactic 4. Treat vegetation as concealment management. I planted a hedge along the left side of my first owned property because I wanted privacy from the neighbor's driveway. It was 4 feet tall within 3 seasons. What I'd created was a corridor, a path from the street to my side entry that was invisible from the road and invisible from every neighboring window. I only saw it when I walked it at night during an audit and realized I couldn't see the street from inside it. The fix isn't to remove everything, it's to understand what each plant provides in terms of sightlines. Low ground cover works. Foundation shrubs maintained to clear windowsills by at least 18 inches work. The standard I use? If an adult can stand in front of that shrub and not be visible from the street or a neighbor's front window, it needs to come down or come back. Sight corridors from the street to your main and secondary entries are not optional. They're the geometry of deterrence. Tactic 5. Position cameras at the decision point, not the entry point. A camera under the eave pointing at your front door records what happened. A camera visible and positioned on the approach path facing outward toward the property corridor tells someone in the pre-screening pass that the decision point is monitored. These are different tools solving different problems. I've run both configurations. The approach-facing camera changed behavior in a documented way. 2 incidents on my rural property where I reviewed footage and could see someone slowing at the property line and moving on. Whether the camera was the reason I can't prove. What I can say is that visible, outward-facing monitoring is a signal that broadcasts at the pre-screening stage, not after. Specific placement: cover the approach corridor from the street, the side entry, and any secondary access point. If your camera is only pointed at the door, you have an evidence collection system. That's useful. It's not deterrence. Tactic 6. Manage the occupancy signal deliberately. Occupancy is the single most powerful deterrent in residential security, and most people manage it passively. A car in the driveway communicates presence. The same driveway empty from 7 in the morning to 6 at night, Monday through Friday, communicates a schedule, which is a different kind of invitation. I've used light timers since my second rental property. Not the same light on the same timer in the same room every night. That pattern is readable within a week of observation. Different rooms, varied timing, one near a front-facing window, a radio at low volume near the front of the house when I'm traveling. These are low-effort, near-zero-cost adjustments that change the occupancy signal from predictable absence to unclear. Unclear is what you want. Unclear fails the pre-screen. Tactic 7. Fix the door frame before you upgrade the lock. Most people, when they think about door security, think about the lock. The lock is almost never the failure point. Standard residential deadbolts are reasonably effective at what they do. The failure point is the door frame. A typical residential door frame is attached to the rough opening with screws that penetrate the jamb but stop short of the structural stud behind it. One solid kick transfers force to that connection, and it fails. Not the lock, the frame around it. I learned this the hard way. On the rental property that got broken into, the deadbolt was intact. The jamb had split clean off the stud. 3-inch screws driven through the strike plate and jammed into the structural stud changed the physics entirely. I've tested this. The force required to defeat that connection is dramatically higher, and the time required is dramatically higher. That time is the resource you're buying. These screws cost less than a restaurant meal. This is the first hardware fix I make on every property, every time. Tactic 8. Use secondary securing devices to manufacture time. The governing principle of the contact layer is time, not impermeability. Law enforcement data on residential intrusion documents consistently that most criminals who encounter active resistance, noise, delay, evidence of occupancy abort within 60 seconds. Not because they couldn't eventually succeed, because 60 seconds of noise and resistance in a residential neighborhood changes their cost-benefit calculation past the threshold they're willing to accept. Door bars and secondary securing devices operate entirely on this principle. A secondary bar brace on a sliding door or an interior door bar on the main entry doesn't make your home impenetrable. It adds 15 to 30 seconds to the forced entry timeline. In the context of a 60-second abort threshold, 15 seconds is not a rounding error. It's potentially the margin. I've run a floor-mounted door bar on my main entry for 11 years. It's the last thing I set before bed. Takes 3 seconds. Tactic 9. Map your choke points. Every home has 2 or 3 physical locations where movement must slow: a staircase, a hallway corner, a doorway between the main living area and the back of the house. Someone moving through your home in the dark, in an unfamiliar environment, has to navigate those carefully. Most people have never thought about this. I've mapped it on every property I've occupied. What I'm identifying is not vulnerability, it's advantage. Knowing where movement must slow removes reaction time from the equation when it matters. You're not improvising in a high-stress moment. You're operating a plan in a space you've already assessed. Walk your home and mark those 3 locations. Know them, that's it. No hardware required. Tactic 10. Preload your household decisions. The single largest source of delay in a home intrusion scenario isn't the intruder. It's the absence of a pre-agreed plan. Who calls emergency services? Who moves where? What signal tells everyone this is a real situation? These decisions, made under stress and in the dark without prior coordination, cost time and introduce confusion at exactly the moment clarity matters most. I call this decision preloading. A 5-minute conversation that produces a shared household protocol eliminates that cost entirely. We've had this conversation in every living arrangement. I've been in partners, kids old enough to participate, housemates. It's not a drill, it's a conversation. 5 minutes. The decisions don't change much between situations, but having them made in advance changes everything about execution. Tactic 11. Use noise as a deterrent layer. A dog dramatically changes the pre-screening and contact calculation simultaneously. Criminal behavior research on residential targeting consistently finds that audible dog presence is one of the most effective deterrents available, not because of physical threat, but because of noise. Noise signals occupancy, attracts neighbor attention, and compresses the operational window. I've had dogs for 14 of the last 22 years. The difference in observable behavior around my properties, people lingering, slow drive-bys, the general ambient attention that a property gets when something feels too quiet is not subtle. If you don't have a dog, a motion-activated barking device achieves a real portion of the deterrent effect at the pre-screening stage. It's not equivalent. It's not nothing. Tactic 12. Understand the access profile, not just the neighborhood feel. Most people's risk model is based on how their neighborhood feels. Mine is based on how my property sits relative to arterial roads and highway access. Residential burglary geography research consistently finds that proximity to highway interchange access is a stronger predictor of targeting than neighborhood income or local crime statistics. Criminals travel to work. A quiet street 12 minutes from a highway on-ramp is not protected by its quiet. It's accessible. I live on a low-traffic residential street. Feels safe. It's also 8 minutes from a major interchange. That access profile changes how I think about my property, what signals I'm broadcasting, and how much the pre-screening controls. Tactics 13, 14, and 15. Maintain the system. Single-effort security degrades. The 3-inch screws stay. The light timers need batteries. The hedge you trimmed in spring is chest-high by August. The motion sensor light that took a power surge during a storm isn't firing anymore, and you haven't noticed because you come home in daylight. The maintenance protocol I use is simple. 1 walk per season, 40 minutes, same audit process as the initial setup. I'm looking for degradation lights that stopped working, vegetation that's grown back into concealment territory, the side gate latch that started sticking. The system only holds if you treat it as a system, not a one-time project. Secondary. Review your door hardware annually. Strike plates back out over time. Screws work loose. 30 seconds with a screwdriver. Third. Keep the communication protocol current. Households change, kids get older, partners change routines, living situations shift. The protocol needs to match the current occupants and the current layout. Here's what I want you to take from this. You're not doing this because something bad is about to happen. You're doing it because designed environments perform better than hoped for ones. Every piece of what I've described costs almost nothing in money and a few hours of honest attention. The audit walk is 40 minutes tonight. The screws are a hardware store run this weekend. The vegetation, you can start on that tomorrow morning. What changes isn't your stress level. It's your relationship to the environment you live in. You stop passively hoping it protects you and start deliberately making it harder to approach, harder to assess, harder to commit to than whatever's 2 doors down. 22 years of doing this taught me one thing that overrides everything else. Criminals are running a calculation, not executing a plan. They're asking whether your property is worth the time and the risk compared to the next option. Your job, the only job, is to make that answer consistently no. From the curb, before anything else starts. Walk it tonight. Fix the first thing you find. Build from there.